there's this overall understanding now that this war or this iteration of the war is likely going to be a lot worse than the last one, which was already very bad and the worst that Lebanon has seen since the civil war. There are fears that the south of Lebanon, south of the Litani, Israel has intentions to create a buffer zone, that area might just be gone after this war. And Hezbollah has said that it's a war to the end for it. And it's a very existential fight for it, as well as for Israel.
Right, now for our top story of the day, and it is Lebanon. Over 300,000 Lebanese civilians are said to have fled their homes amid evacuation orders from the Israeli military. It comes as Israel is ramping up attacks on Hezbollah in the south of Lebanon after the terrorist groups launched rockets into Israel amidst the ongoing war waged by the US and its allies against Iran. So how big a role has Hezbollah to play in this ongoing war? And what next for the Lebanese, once again caught in the middle of regional conflict? Joining me to discuss this is Nada Homsi, correspondent at the National's Beirut Bureau. Hello, Nada. How are you?
Hi, how are you?
I'm okay. Everything all right with you at the moment in Beirut?
Yeah, everything is going okay. The thing is, in Beirut, the majority of the population is doing okay. We're just dealing a lot with the displacement crisis that was caused by the bombardment of Dahye, which is the Beirut southern suburb, and also South Lebanon and the Bekaa Valley, as Israeli airstrikes continue to pound across various parts of Lebanon. But in Beirut proper, I would say our main concern here is how to take care of the displacement crisis, given the government's very limited ability to provide shelters. They've opened shelters very quickly. They were at capacity, and now we're seeing people since the very beginning really in the streets and sleeping wherever they can, those that can't find shelter or don't have anyone to stay with. Plus daycares and schools are closed, so parents are all just struggling to figure out what to do with their children in the middle of a war.
Yeah, I mean, it's just one of the strange things, having grown up in Lebanon, is how you can be having extraordinary things happening in the country, and yet in many parts of it, and it's a very small country, you know, things go on normally, people cope and get on with it. But obviously, for the inhabitants of southern Lebanon and the southern suburbs of Beirut, I mean, how many people have been displaced at this stage?
The government estimates for the shelters are over 100,000, but the real number is much higher. The thing is, the displacement is so quickly happening that no one really has accurate figures yet. But our estimates are in the hundreds of thousands. I mean, the southern suburb of Dahya has between 500,000 to 1 million people living in it by itself. Never mind all the people that are displaced from the entirety of South Lebanon and other parts of Lebanon as well.
I think a lot of people listening to this have questions about Hezbollah and their role in Lebanon. You know, Hezbollah are sometimes seen as a state within a state of Lebanon. It's a difficult question, but what do you think the level of support for Hezbollah is amongst Lebanese citizens?
It's hard to say. You know Lebanon quite well, so you know exactly in what capacity it's a state within a state, and also Lebanon's history of various militias also establishing states within a state. So Hezbollah is just the most recent iteration of that. I think that obviously Hezbollah has a lot of support within its constituency and also people outside of the Shiite Muslim constituency, but also a lot of opposition. Lebanon is a very politically polarized place on both political and sectarian grounds. But its most recent decision to launch rockets at Israel and reignite the war that had just ended 15 months ago, I think proved to be a very unpopular one, even among people within its own constituency, not because they're ideologically opposed to it, but because they're so exhausted from having been displaced. Lebanon has not been able to rebuild in the south since that war ended, and people are still trying to get on their feet. They haven't been able to get on their feet since the last war. So the fact that it's just been sparked all over again, displacement is happening all over again, people are dying, over 260 people dead since Monday, killed in Israeli strikes. And people are just, terrified of what's going to happen next, because there's this overall understanding now that this war or this iteration of the war is likely going to be a lot worse than the last one, which was already very bad and the worst that Lebanon has seen since the civil war. There are fears that the south of Lebanon, south of the Litani, Israel has intentions to create a buffer zone, that area might just be gone after this war. And Hezbollah has said that it's a war to the end for it. And it's a very existential fight for it, as well as for Israel.
I mean, I think what a lot of people again are thinking is that certainly in the very recent conflict, it seemed like Hezbollah had been almost completely wiped out. I mean, certainly incredibly depleted. So how much of them is left as a military threat?
So that is a really good question. During the last 15 months, 14, 15 months since the war ended, there's been a concerted Lebanese government pressure, as well as pressure from foreign countries, including Israel and the US, to disarm Hezbollah. And Hezbollah did seemingly disarm south of the Litani, and it had refused to do so north of the Litani, and the government was still working on that. So they were very set on getting Hezbollah's disarmament across all of Lebanon on the road. But in addition to that, obviously during the last war, Israel had decapitated Hezbollah's entire leadership and destroyed a good part of its armament. And there were estimates before that around 75% of its armaments had been destroyed. But now we know that that's not the case. It seems as though Hezbollah was quietly rearming. Israel had, through the last 15 months, kept striking parts of South Lebanon and other parts of Lebanon because it was a very one-sided ceasefire. They didn't withdraw Hezbollah targets in an attempt to prevent them from rearming and further destroy their capabilities. But now we're seeing that Hezbollah is still very capable of launching rockets, and that it has regathered its strength. I saw a Reuters report yesterday where they were estimating Hezbollah still has 95,000 fighters, and 5,000 were killed during the last war. So it's a notoriously secretive organization. We don't know what the full capability of it is, but we definitely know that they are currently very capable of launching rockets, as well as engaging with Israel on the ground as it tries to further invade into Lebanese territory.
Which sort of answers, in a sense, the question I get asked a lot. You know, when people find out that I grew up in Lebanon or whatever, they just go, well, look, you know, Hezbollah is this kind of state within a state in Lebanon. Why do the Lebanese or the Lebanese government not just get rid of Hezbollah? Because obviously they start firing rockets into Israel. Israel's going to reply, and Israel claims to be doing the job that, you know, the Lebanese government should be doing. What do Lebanese think about that? And, you know, what's the answer to that question?
What's the answer to the question of why Hezbollah is allowed to exist in Lebanon still?
Well, when people ask, you know, why do the Lebanese not deal with the Hezbollah? Why don't they get rid of Hezbollah?
Okay. Yeah, no, it's a very good question and a very complicated one. Hezbollah is obviously a paramilitary, but also a political party that is very active in Lebanon's parliament and its governance, even now. So although it's a proscribed terrorist organization outside of Lebanon and Western countries, it very much isn't the case here. Because it's active in the governance, like I said. But having said that, people were so angry, and I think Lebanon's leaders also so angry because they had tried to maintain the ceasefire, however one-sided it was. It gave some relative stability for Lebanon. They were trying so hard to maintain the ceasefire, and when this war reignited because Hezbollah fired its rockets, there's a lot of anger, and they made a decision earlier this week to outlaw the group's military activities. And I reported also earlier this week that they had started an arrest campaign, not against Hezbollah specifically, but against non-state actors and people with weapons that were, not allowed to have them. They've arrested dozens of people already, and I've had security sources admit that some of them are Hezbollah, but it's usually people that are carrying Kalashnikov, stuff like that. It's never large rockets and so on. And the reason for that is because as much as Lebanon is trying to go after Hezbollah elements now and show that it is trying to, outlaw the group's military activities or disarm them, at the same time, it's such a sensitive situation because Hezbollah represents so much of Lebanon's constituency It is a lot of the Shia constituency, as well as a lot of people who aren't Shia Muslims also support Hezbollah. And a lot of people don't support Hezbollah. Like I said, it's very polarized. But I forgot what I was saying.
Don't worry.
I was on the roll. Yeah.
Sadly, I mean, you were brilliant, but sadly, we're running out of time on that. I could talk to you all day, but please look after yourself. Send my love to everyone in Lebanon, and say hello to your lovely cat that keep popping in on the side there. That was very sweet. Nothing I like better than seeing a Beirut cat. So that was Nada Homsi, correspondent at the National's Beirut bureau.